In 1997, a man named Reed Hastings received a late fee from a Blockbuster video store. The fee was $40. It was for a copy of Apollo 13. He was embarrassed. Not because of the money. Hastings was wealthy. He had just sold a software company for $700 million. $40 was nothing. He was embarrassed because it was his fault. He had forgotten to return the tape, and Blockbuster, operating exactly as designed, had charged him for the inconvenience. On the drive home, Hastings thought about the late fee. He thought about how the whole model worked, how every rental came with a countdown timer, how the anxiety of that timer was built into the business, how millions of Americans every week were being reminded that Blockbuster was not on their side. And then he had a thought. What if there were no late fees at all? What if you could rent a movie, keep it as long as you wanted, and send it back when you were done, without any penalty, any anxiety, any receipt with a warning printed on it? What if renting a movie felt less like a transaction with a fine print and more like a membership, like belonging to something? That thought, on a drive home from a gym in Santa Cruz, California in 1997, became Netflix. Today, Netflix has 260 million paid subscribers in 190 countries. It spends $17 billion a year making original content. It has won more Academy Awards than any Hollywood studio. Its most-watched show, Squid Game, was watched by 111 million households in its first month. It is the most successful media company ever created, and it started because one man got a $40 late fee. This is the full story of how Netflix was built, how it survived bankruptcy, rejection, and 2 decades of competition from companies 10 times its size, how it bet everything on streaming before streaming was possible, on original content before anyone believed a tech company could make prestige television, and on global expansion before anyone had proven that a single streaming service could work across 190 different cultures and languages, and how, in doing all of that, it didn't just build a company, it changed the way the entire world watches stories. Reed Hastings was not the kind of person who was supposed to build a media company. He grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, the son of a lawyer. He studied mathematics at Bowdoin College in Maine, then joined the Peace Corps after graduation, teaching high school math in Swaziland for 2 years. He came back to the United States and enrolled at Stanford, where he earned a master's degree in computer science in 1988. What drove Hastings was not entertainment, it was efficiency. He was interested in how systems worked, how you designed a process to produce a consistent, scalable result. He co-founded a software company called Pure Atria in the early 1990s that made version control software for software developers, tools to help engineering teams collaborate, track changes, and avoid the kind of chaos that emerges when multiple people are working on the same codebase at the same time. When Rational Software acquired Pure Atria in 1997 for $700 million in stock, Hastings received a significant windfall and found himself at a crossroads. He was in his mid-30s, financially secure, and looking for the next problem worth solving. Mark Randolph found him there. Randolph was a direct marketing executive who had worked with Hastings at Pure Atria. He was the opposite of Hastings in almost every way. Gregarious, where Hastings was analytical, a marketer, where Hastings was an engineer. He had spent his career thinking about how to reach customers, what messages resonated, what offers converted. For months, Randolph and Hastings carpooled to work together, and during those drives, Randolph pitched Hastings on business ideas: personalized dog food, custom shampoo. Most of the ideas were bad. Hastings shot them down with the same methodical analysis he had applied to software systems. Then Randolph suggested renting videos by mail. The timing was critical. In 1997, DVDs had just been introduced to the American market. The format was revolutionary, a disc the size of a CD that held a full movie in digital quality. Unlike VHS cassettes, DVDs were lightweight, durable, and small enough to ship in a standard envelope without the kind of damage that would have made mailing videotapes impractical. Randolph and Hastings tested the idea with a simple experiment. They bought a used CD at a music store, put it in an envelope, and mailed it to Hastings's house. When it arrived, undamaged, intact, delivered by the United States Postal Service, they knew the logistics could work. In 1997, they co-founded Netflix. Randolph became the first CEO. Hastings became chairman and provided the initial funding, approximately $2.5 million of his own money. The name was a combination of two concepts: the Internet, which was beginning to transform commerce and communication, and Flix, slang for movies, Netflix, a name that implied, even in 1997, that the future of watching movies was connected to the Internet in ways that hadn't yet been worked out. The original website launched on April 14, 1998. On the first day, it offered 925 titles. The business model at launch was not subscription, it was rental. You paid per disc, plus shipping. You could also buy DVDs outright. The website was primitive. The user experience was clunky. The selection was limited. And yet, even in its earliest form, Netflix was doing something no one else was doing. It was renting movies without a store, without a due date, and without a late fee. The first version of Netflix almost killed the company. The rental model worked. Customers liked getting DVDs in the mail. But the economics were brutal. Shipping costs ate into revenue. Customer acquisition was expensive. And the parental model meant that Netflix made money only when customers actually used the service, which wasn't often enough to cover the overhead. By 1999, Netflix was burning through cash. The dot-com boom was inflating the cost of everything: engineers, marketing, technology infrastructure. The company had hired too many people too fast. Revenue was not growing at the rate needed to justify the spending. Hastings and Randolph faced a choice that would define the company's future: iterate on the existing model or reimagine it entirely. They chose to reimagine it. In September 1999, Netflix launched a subscription model. For a flat monthly fee, initially $15.95, subscribers could rent as many DVDs as they wanted, with no due dates and no late fees. The model worked on a queue system. You built a list of movies you wanted online, Netflix mailed you discs from the top of your queue, and when you returned one, the next one on the list was automatically sent. The subscription model changed everything. Instead of making money per transaction, Netflix now made money continuously, every month, whether subscribers watched one movie or 20. The fixed cost of acquiring a subscriber was amortized over months and years of recurring revenue. And the no due date, no late fee model was not just a feature. It was a values statement. We trust you. We are not timing you. We are not waiting to fine you. Customers responded. Subscriber numbers began to climb, but 1999 and 2000 were brutal years for every internet company. The dot-com bubble burst in March 2000. The Nasdaq fell 78% from its peak. Companies that had raised hundreds of millions of dollars were suddenly worthless. Investors who had poured money into internet businesses were burned and terrified. Netflix was not immune. The company was still losing money. Hastings replaced Randolph as CEO in 1999, a move that Randolph later described as painful but necessary. Hastings had the financial and operational discipline the company needed to survive. Randolph, the visionary marketer who had helped build the original concept, stepped back from day-to-day leadership. In 2000, at the absolute nadir of Netflix's early struggles, with the dot-com crash burning through the technology sector, Hastings flew to Dallas to offer the company to Blockbuster for $50 million. Blockbuster passed. It was, in retrospect, the most consequential business decision of the early 21st century. Hastings flew back to California. He cut costs aggressively. He reduced Netflix's workforce by a third, letting go of roughly 70 employees. He focused the company on the subscription model with absolute discipline, and he kept building. In 2002, Netflix went public on the Nasdaq Stock Exchange. The IPO priced at $15 per share. The company had 600,000 subscribers and was still not profitable. 3 years later, it would have 4 million subscribers, and the losses would finally be turning into profits. The survival of Netflix in those early years was not inevitable. It required Hastings to make decisions that were counterintuitive, to cut when the instinct was to grow, to focus when the temptation was to diversify, to believe in a model that hadn't yet been proven viable. What saved Netflix was not genius, it was stubbornness, a refusal to accept that the model was broken when the evidence was that the model was right, and everything else, the spending, the timing, the market conditions, was simply wrong. By 2004, Netflix had 2 million subscribers and a business that was beginning to work. Blockbuster, watching from across the country, had finally decided to take the threat seriously. John Antioco, Blockbuster's CEO, launched Blockbuster Online, a direct copy of the Netflix subscription model. DVDs by mail, no late fees, monthly subscription, queue system. It was, point by point, Netflix's playbook applied to Blockbuster's resources, and Blockbuster had resources Netflix could only dream of. 9,000 stores across America, 84,000 employees, a brand that virtually every American household recognized. The Blockbuster Online launch was backed by a massive marketing budget. The service was priced aggressively to compete directly with Netflix. Reed Hastings was worried. This was the nightmare scenario, the incumbent waking up, copying your model, and using its scale to crush you. What he did next was counterintuitive. Rather than matching Blockbuster's price cuts, Netflix raised its prices. Rather than trying to outmarket Blockbuster, Netflix doubled down on technology. Hastings invested heavily in Netflix's recommendation algorithm, the system that suggested movies to subscribers based on their viewing history. The algorithm, called Cinematch, was designed to do something Blockbuster could never do: learn what each individual subscriber wanted to watch and surface it for them. The insight was profound. Blockbuster organized movies into categories: new releases, comedy, action. Netflix organized them around you. Every subscriber saw a different version of the Netflix catalog, one tailored to their specific taste. A person who loved French New Wave cinema and a person who loved action thrillers were both Netflix subscribers, but they experienced completely different services. This personalization created loyalty that price alone couldn't replicate. Netflix subscribers didn't just use Netflix. They felt increasingly that Netflix understood them in a way that no video store ever had. Meanwhile, Blockbuster's challenge was not just strategic, it was financial. Carl Icahn, the activist investor who had acquired a significant stake in Blockbuster, was furious about the money being spent on Blockbuster Online. He believed the late fee elimination, That Antioco had paired with the online launch was an inexcusable sacrifice of revenue. The board war between Ican and Antioco paralyzed Blockbuster's leadership at exactly the moment it most needed to move fast. By 2006, Blockbuster Online had 2 million subscribers, closing the gap on Netflix's 6 million. The hybrid model Antioco had built, where subscribers could return discs to physical stores and swap them for in-store rentals, was genuinely differentiated. Netflix had no answer for it. Then Antioco was pushed out. His replacement, Jim Keyes, rolled back the in-store exchange program and refocused Blockbuster on its physical stores. Netflix exhaled. The competitive threat that had seemed existential in 2004 and 2005 evaporated as Blockbuster dismantled its own best weapon. By 2007, Netflix had 7 million subscribers. Blockbuster Online was stagnating, and Hastings was already thinking about something that would make the entire DVD buy mail business obsolete. In January 2007, Netflix announced a new feature called Watch Now. It was simple in concept. Netflix subscribers could stream movies and TV shows directly to their computers over the internet, instantly, without waiting for a disc in the mail. The library was small, about 1,000 titles. The picture quality was inconsistent. Broadband internet was not yet in every American home, and the speeds required for smooth video streaming were at the edge of what most home connections could handle. None of that was the point. The point was that Hastings had been thinking about this for years. Long before it was technically viable, he had understood that the future of video delivery was digital. That one day, he didn't know exactly when, but one day, broadband would be fast enough and cheap enough that streaming video would be as easy as turning on a television. And on that day, the company that owned the customer relationship and the recommendation engine and the content library would be worth far more than the company that owned the most stores or mailed the most discs. Netflix had been investing in streaming infrastructure since 2005, 2 full years before the Watch Now launch. Hastings had been quietly building the technical capability, while the public face of the company remained the red envelope. The 2007 launch was not a polished product. It was a proof of concept, a signal to subscribers, to competitors, to Hollywood studios, and to investors that Netflix understood where the industry was going and had already started the journey. The timing aligned with 2 external developments that Hastings had anticipated. The first was broadband penetration. By 2007, more than half of American homes had broadband internet connections. That number was climbing fast. The technical barrier to streaming video, which had seemed insurmountable in 2002 and 2003, was dissolving. The second was the television itself. In 2008, Netflix struck a deal with LG Electronics to put a Netflix button on new television remote controls. Similar deals followed with Samsung, Sony, and eventually every major television manufacturer. Suddenly, streaming Netflix didn't require a computer. You could do it from your couch, on your television, with a single button. In 2008, Netflix launched on the Xbox 360 gaming console. In 2009, it launched on the PlayStation 3. In 2010, it launched on the iPad. On the same day, Apple announced the device. Each launch expanded the addressable market for streaming. Each new device was another on-ramp to Netflix. And each subscriber who streamed a movie, instead of waiting for a disc, was a signal, both to Hastings and to the market, that the transition from physical to digital was not a distant future event. It was happening now. Subscriber growth accelerated. Netflix crossed 10 million subscribers in 2009, 20 million in 2010. The stock price, which had traded below $5 in 2004, climbed past $50 in 2010 and kept going. Hollywood was paying attention, and Hollywood was nervous. The great irony of Netflix's rise is that the company that disrupted the video rental industry was itself almost disrupted, not by a competitor, but by the very studios whose content it depended on. In Netflix's early years, the content question was simple. DVDs were sold to retailers, and retailers, including Netflix, could rent them to anyone under the doctrine of first sale. You bought the disc, you owned it, you could rent it to whoever you wanted. Netflix didn't need permission from Hollywood. It just needed to buy DVDs. Streaming was different. Streaming required a license, and licenses required negotiation with the studios. Negotiations in which Netflix, as a technology company with no Hollywood relationships and no leverage, was at a profound disadvantage. The first major streaming deal Netflix signed was with Starz, the premium cable network, in 2008. For approximately $30 million a year, Netflix got streaming rights to films from Sony Pictures and Walt Disney Studios, a library that included hundreds of major releases. The deal was, in retrospect, catastrophically underpriced. Starz executives later acknowledged they had no idea how valuable the license would become as Netflix's subscriber base exploded. When the Starz deal came up for renewal in 2011, the network wanted $300 million a year, 10 times the original price. Netflix declined. The Starz content, including all the Sony and Disney films, was removed from the streaming library. The market panicked. Netflix's stock fell nearly 75% in the second half of 2011. Subscribers cancelled in large numbers. Hastings, who had made a public relations error by announcing a controversial price increase and a failed plan to split Netflix's DVD and streaming services into two separate companies, was facing the worst crisis of his tenure. He acknowledged the mistakes publicly, walked back the service split, and refocused. But the Starz episode revealed something important. Netflix's dependence on licensed content was an existential vulnerability. The studios could, at any moment, raise their prices, withdraw their catalogs, or decide to launch competing streaming services of their own. As long as Netflix was a distributor of other people's content, it was at the mercy of those other people. The solution Hastings reached was audacious. Netflix would become a studio. It would produce its own original content, shows and movies that Netflix owned outright, that no studio could pull, that no competitor could license. In 2011, Netflix acquired the rights to produce House of Cards, a political drama series starring Kevin Spacey, directed by David Fincher, based on a British miniseries. The price was reported at $100 million for 2 seasons, sight unseen. No pilot, no test screening, just a check. It was an unprecedented bet in the history of television. Studios made pilots because no one, not even the most experienced executives, could know in advance whether a show would work. Netflix was buying 2 full seasons based on the reputations of the people involved and the data it had collected on subscriber viewing habits. The data told a story. Netflix subscribers who had watched the British House of Cards had also watched Kevin Spacey films and David Fincher films at unusually high rates. The overlap suggested an audience for exactly the kind of prestige political drama that a Fincher-Spacey collaboration would produce. House of Cards premiered on Netflix in February 2013. All 13 episodes of the first season were released simultaneously, the entire season available on day one. It was not how television worked. Television worked on weekly episodes, appointment viewing, the communal experience of everyone watching the same episode at the same time. Netflix released the whole season at once and let subscribers watch it however they wanted. Binge-watching was born. Or rather, Netflix gave it a name and a format and made it the default mode of engagement with serialized storytelling. House of Cards was nominated for 9 Emmy Awards. It became the first online-only series to receive a major Emmy nomination. It proved that Netflix could produce content at the level of the best television studios in the world. The content strategy accelerated. Orange is the New Black launched in 2013, Narcos in 2015, Stranger Things in 2016, The Crown in 2016, Ozark in 2017. Each show added to the library of content that only Netflix subscribers could access. Each show deepened the value of the Netflix subscription. Each show made canceling Netflix feel like losing access to something irreplaceable. In January 2016, Reed Hastings stood on stage at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas and made an announcement that the technology and media industries were not fully prepared for. Netflix, he said, was now available in 130 countries, not launching in 130 countries, not expanding to 130 countries over the next 5 years. Available right now, as of today. You could open Netflix in Indonesia, in India, in Brazil, in South Korea, in virtually every country on Earth, except China, North Korea, Crimea, and Syria. And you could subscribe and start watching. The speed of the rollout was intentional and strategic. Hastings had watched the cable television industry build international businesses over decades, one country at a time, navigating regulatory environments, negotiating carriage deals, building local infrastructure. That model was slow and expensive. Netflix's model was the opposite, a single global platform that could be deployed everywhere simultaneously, with content delivery handled through partnerships with local internet service providers. The global launch was the culmination of years of preparation. Netflix had been building its global content library since 2012, acquiring streaming rights in country after country. It had invested in subtitle and dubbing capabilities to make its library accessible in dozens of languages. It had studied the regulatory environments in every major market. What Hastings understood, and what most of his competitors did not, was that storytelling is universal. The fundamental human experience of being riveted by a great story, of caring what happens to characters, of losing yourself in a narrative. That experience is not American. It is not limited by language or culture or geography. He was right, and the proof came from the most unexpected direction. In September 2021, Netflix released a Korean-language survival drama series called Squid Game. The show followed 456 contestants, all in desperate financial situations, as they competed in deadly children's games for a prize of 45.6 billion Korean won. Squid Game was not an American story. It was not in English. The cultural references were specifically Korean. The humor was Korean. The social commentary on class, on debt, on the desperation that financial systems can produce was rooted in specifically Korean experience. It became the most watched series in Netflix history. Within 4 weeks of its release, 111 million households had watched it. It was watched in 94 countries. It generated an estimated $900 million in value for Netflix. It won 6 Emmy Awards, including Outstanding Directing, the first time a non-English language series had won that award. Squid Game proved what Hastings had argued since the global launch, that the best content in any language could find an audience everywhere, that geography and language were barriers only if you let them be. The international strategy also served a second purpose. It diversified Netflix's revenue base in a way that made the company extraordinarily resilient. By 2022, more than half of Netflix's subscribers were outside the United States. The company was no longer dependent on American growth for its financial health. It had become a genuinely global business, the first truly global entertainment company in history. Today, Netflix is worth approximately $300 billion. It has 260 million paid subscribers across 190 countries. It spends $17 billion a year on content, more than any traditional Hollywood studio. It has won more Oscar nominations than Warner Brothers, more than Paramount, more than Disney. The company that Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph founded in a living room in Scotts Valley, California, funded with $2.5 million and an idea about mailing DVDs in envelopes, is now the dominant force in global entertainment. But the story of Netflix is not simply a story about a company that succeeded. It is a story about a particular kind of thinking, a refusal to accept that the way things are done is the way things must be done. When Hastings thought about the late fee problem, he didn't just think about eliminating it. He thought about what it revealed about the underlying relationship between a rental company and its customers, a relationship built on mistrust, on penalty, on the extraction of maximum revenue from every interaction. And he designed Netflix to be the opposite of that, a relationship built on value, on trust, on the feeling that the company was on your side. When Netflix decided to enter streaming in 2007, the technology was barely adequate. The library was tiny. The business case was uncertain. But Hastings had learned, in the early years of the company, that the right move is often the one that feels premature, because by the time a move feels obvious, it is already too late. When Netflix decided to make original content, the risk was enormous. $100 million for 2 seasons of a show that hadn't been tested. But Hastings had data that no one else had. Years of subscriber viewing behavior that revealed patterns invisible to traditional television executives who relied on ratings and focus groups. And when Netflix decided to go global, not gradually, not carefully, but all at once, in 130 countries, in a single day, it was because Hastings understood that the internet does not have national borders, that a great story is a great story, that the Korean drama that seems too culturally specific for international audiences is, in fact, exactly universal enough to be watched by 111 million households. Netflix has not been without failures. The password-sharing crackdown of 2023 was rocky and controversial before it worked. The ad-supported tier took time to gain traction. Several expensive original films disappointed. The stock, which peaked at $700 per share in 2021, fell below $175 in 2022 before recovering. But the core insight that animated Netflix from the beginning, that people want great stories delivered conveniently, without friction, without penalty, at a price that feels fair, has proven durable across 25 years of changing technology, changing competition, and changing culture. Reed Hastings stepped back from the CEO role in January 2023, handing the reins to Greg Peters and Ted Sarandos. He remains executive chairman. The $40 late fee that started it all, the one for Apollo 13, the one Hastings claims he was embarrassed about in a gym parking lot in Santa Cruz, has become one of the most famous origin stories in business history. Hastings has since admitted the story might be slightly embellished. The late fee was real. The exact amount may not have been $40. The moment of inspiration in the parking lot may have been compressed from a longer period of thinking, but the insight was real. The frustration was real. The conviction that there was a better way to give people access to stories, without the countdown timer, without the penalty, without the late fee, was real. And the company it produced is the most powerful entertainment business in the history of the world. Please rewind. Actually, don't. That's the whole point.